Hello, and welcome back to Buckeye Bigfoot. I wanted to get at least one more submission put up before I headed out tomorrow for the Ohio Bigfoot Conference up in Salt Fork State Park. We're heading up a little early to do some hiking, get some video footage, so maybe you guys can look at something new, and if we're lucky, have a little face-to-face time with Bigfoot himself. If that happens, I promise, no shaky camera footage. Clear photo or video, or it didn't happen. That's my promise to you. All right, well, we're going to move on to the story now. This came from Judith, and Judith wants to tell her tale. So here goes. My name is Judith, and I want to tell you about the time I had a pregnant stray dog on my land and about the night Bigfoot tried to take her. She was skinny, too skinny for any dog, and frighteningly so for a pregnant dog. Cooler autumn temperatures had come early in Ohio, making the September morning feel more like October, and I could see her shiver as she stood between my back porch and the shed near the tree line. She stood there uncertainly. I had seen her the previous few days from a distance in the woods out back, but she never came close to me or the house. I guess it was the smell of my breakfast bacon that made her desperate enough to come closer. I went inside, got the 3 pieces of leftover bacon, and walked out onto the back porch. She began to dart away as soon as I stepped out, so I tossed the bacon out in the yard as far as they would go, which wasn't very far. Then I went inside. I watched from the kitchen window as she searched for and ate all 3 pieces of bacon before returning to somewhere in the trees. Now, living out in the rural areas of Ohio, it isn't uncommon to come across a stray dog, pregnant or otherwise. My recent visitor looked to be a mix of hound dog and maybe a German shepherd. I wasn't sure. She had the tan and black markings of a shepherd, but the fur was very close and short to her body, and she had floppy ears, not at all like a German shepherd. Her legs were also shorter than a shepherd, and from her snout to her rear, she had a much shorter body length, looking a little squashed. In total, she was a mash-up of a mutt, and well, as we all know, those are oftentimes the best dogs. Over the next week, I coaxed her closer and closer to the house, setting one of those aluminum pie pans full of food closer to the house with each meal. By the end of the week, she finally settled into the large box I had turned over on its side, lined with old blankets, and set up against the house in the corner where the porch railing met the house. I did try to coax her inside, as it was already quite chilly, and especially so at night, but she refused. I think it was only her desperate situation that forced her to give me some semblance of trust. Over the days, I came to learn Mama, as I had begun to call her. Mama had a very timid, nervous nature, and was easily frightened and spooked with sounds and sudden movement. She also rarely made any noise, no sound at all, which made me wonder about her past. Now, I don't know what happened in her life before she found her way into my yard, but I didn't think it had been very pleasant. It was late one evening, and I was catching up on some reading when I suddenly heard Mama let out a long, moaning whine that turned into frantic barks. As I said, she had not made a sound the entire time she had been at the house, so I was a little concerned. I thought perhaps a bear or something else might have wandered into the yard. We weren't too far from a wildlife preserve area, and the forest behind my house did connect to other stretches of wooded areas that linked into the nature preserve. And while there really weren't supposed to be any bears in our area, I know for a fact there were some, as I had seen a couple over the years, but never close to the house and always at a distance. With this in mind, I headed to the back door and got the handheld spotlight off the shelf in the laundry room. I turned on the spotlight, flipped the back porch light on, and stepped out to see what was causing the commotion. I almost hit Mama with the screen door when I opened it up, as she had backed across the porch a good 8 or 9 feet away from her corner. I wasn't expecting that. I shined my light over to the left towards her box in the corner, the direction in which she had been barking, only to immediately be met with an angry roar that I felt reverberate in my chest. Now, I didn't know much about them, but I knew immediately that what I was looking at was a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot. It stood on the other side of the porch railing, a long arm reaching out across the porch as if it had been trying to get to Mama. Now, the porch itself stood about 3.5 feet off the ground, since the land had a slope from the front of the house down to the back. The spotlight was on the Bigfoot for less than a second before it pulled its arm back, then let out another roar that I felt in my chest again, and simultaneously began banging on the wooden porch railing. I should say it only banged once and broke it to pieces. I was terrified. As I said, Mama had backed up, and she began to back up even further on the porch and leaned in strongly to the side of my leg. We were about 8 feet or so from the end of the porch where the beast stood, and I feared it would either climb up on the porch with us or walk around to where the steps were, when it suddenly whirled around, went running back toward the tree line beyond the shed out back. I stood there frozen and watched it run and fade into the darkness. Now, I might have only had the light on that thing for a fraction of a second, but I know what I saw. I saw the leathery face and the brownish fur that seemed to have red highlights in it. And those red highlights may have only been showing because of the intensity of the spotlight. I don't know. I know it had fingers of a sort, and what would have been a thumb on a human hand seemed to be just an oddly set extra finger on its hand or paw. I know because they were only a couple feet away from me as I reached out across the porch. But in my mind, those fingers were within fingertip distance. And it really was that arm reaching out over the porch that scared me the most. Later, I thought about that arm reaching across the porch, and I realized that thing had to stand a minimum of 7.5 feet tall, maybe 8. And I was judging that from how much was visible of its body above the porch and railing. The porch that I knew was set high off the ground. I was scared beyond words, but not so scared that I didn't know I needed to get in the house. And there was no way I was leaving Mama out there to face that thing alone in the night. Whether she wanted to come inside or not, I was taking her inside. I opened the screen door, planning to reach down and scoop up Mama with her big pregnant belly, when she decided for me and darted into the house with no encouragement from me. I quickly closed the back door behind me and locked it, and vaguely I was aware that that little deadbolt would offer no protection if that thing outside wanted to get in. I was still shaking as I walked around the ground floor of the house, making sure everything was closed and locked, and that every curtain and blind was closed. I don't know why, but I did not want to look out and see that thing, and I didn't want it to look in and be able to see me. Mama hadn't left the laundry room, I realized, and I walked back in to find her between the washing machine and the wall, with her nose in the corner, just standing there shaking. I wasn't sure how she forced herself in, as the gap from the machine to the wall was far less than the width of her pregnant belly was wide, but despite my best efforts, she refused to come out, and I didn't blame her. I pulled down some of the towels that I had folded earlier when doing laundry and made a nest in the opposite corner near the entrance of the kitchen, hoping she would take to it when she calmed down. Already having an idea of her really timid nature, I decided it was best to leave her alone, despite being worried about her. Actually, I thought her plan was a pretty good one, and I fought my own desire to go hide in the bottom of my closet. Instead, still feeling jumpy inside, I went to the kitchen and turned on the laptop that perpetually sat out on my kitchen table. I don't know why I expected to find an answer on the internet as to why a Sasquatch had chosen to visit my yard that night, or what I should do about it. But believe me when I tell you that I read the entire internet as fast as I could looking for answers. I became very alarmed to read about how Bigfoot was known to kill dogs. I was perplexed as most of the reports of Bigfoot killing a dog came during the time a dog was barking at it. But Mama had never made a sound, I suspected, anyway, until the Bigfoot was very near. So I didn't think she drew it to the porch by noise alone. So I wonder, did it smell her? Did it know she was there? Do they hunt by smell? I couldn't find a definitive answer, and I suspect there isn't one known to us yet. I was still reading everything I could about Bigfoot online when I heard Mama's nails clicking on the linoleum floor in the laundry room, and she began to pace back and forth. First, I was glad she had come out of the corner, and then I became worried that maybe the beast had returned and she could smell it. But that was not the case. It was a little later when her breathing started picking up and she finally laid down on the pallet of towels I had made for her that I knew what was happening. Yeah, she started to give birth. I left the internet Bigfoot world behind and I knelt by her as her labor began. I had been sitting with her for a while and she had given birth to her first puppy. It was a nice moment. About 10 minutes later, I suddenly heard a distinctive slap against the house. It sounded as if it was just under the kitchen window opposite on the corner of the house that overlooked the side yard. And let me add, that was the window that I had been sitting near as I was searching the internet on my laptop. Mama whimpered and looked at me with large, frightened eyes and let out a half yelp. Now, whether that was from pain of birth or from fear, I didn't know, but I felt like yelping too. I will say that I apparently did learn a thing or two from the internet and the Bigfoot world that night online, and I knew what that sound was. If I hadn't done that research, I might have stupidly gone out to look around. Yeah, probably not, but still. I was rather nervous being in the small laundry room with the back door so close to us, but I didn't think I could safely move Mama, so I decided to brave it out with her right there. I had little in the way of defense, and what I did have was in the garage, and that being bear spray, and who knew how old that was. There suddenly came a succession of several slaps now against the house, and I noticed they were coming from opposite ends. That told me there was more than one of those things out there. Then the screaming started. Now these were unlike the roar the one off the back porch had given me. These were higher pitched, long, and sustained. If the roar earlier could have been described as a roar of frustration and anger, these screams could only be described as war cries. Soon after came the sound of stones pelting the house, with the window above the sink taking a direct hit. Luckily, it didn't break entirely. I noticed that the rock was lodged in the hole that it had made in the glass, and the rest of the window was spiderwebbed and fragmented. I don't know what the term for that is. It looked as if it would fall to a million pieces if you touched it, and you still couldn't see out of it. The rocks kept coming. I sat there and huddled in the laundry room, trying to soothe Mama. And it was at that point, when I saw the kitchen window break and the stones kept coming, that I decided I had to call the sheriff's department. I knew I would sound ridiculous calling in about a Bigfoot on my property, so I just told the dispatcher there was someone on my property and they had broken a window with a rock. She told me a deputy was en route and to stay inside. I crawled back into the laundry room, cradling the cordless phone, and I checked on Mama. She had already delivered Puppy 2 while I was checking out the rock damage to the window and on the phone with the dispatcher. And it looked like Puppy 3 was on its way. And just before the deputy arrived out front, Puppy 4 was pushing its way into the world. When the deputy did arrive, I was relieved, but nervous. It was about 20-25 minutes before I saw the car headlights shine against the blinds in the living room window. Nervously, I stood on the front porch and told the deputy what had happened. Well, almost everything. Maybe because there were more sightings of that thing either that night or in the area in general, or maybe because I sensed he knew I wasn't telling him the whole truth. Well, the deputy seemed to be cautiously probing my story and began to ask more and more pointed questions. Although the stone throwing had stopped, I was worried that I could be putting this deputy at risk, as I had not fully disclosed what I thought was on the property, or rather what I had seen on the property. So I stressed that he should be careful because I was certain there were multiple quote-unquote people out there, because I knew the stones had been coming in from all directions. I waited nervously while he walked the perimeter of the house, and I don't know what he saw exactly. I went in and I peeked from behind the curtain on the back porch after I saw him walk around that side of the house. And from there I caught the sight of his flashlight beam bouncing around on the ground, and then back to the tree line several times, and then back to the ground by the porch, and back to the tree line. Afterwards, he came inside and looked at the damage to the kitchen window, and he asked me about the damage to the back porch railing. I had forgotten to mention that. I told him I didn't know when that happened. I think he knew I was lying. As we stood there talking, Mama whimpered in the laundry room again. He was curious what that was, of course, so I explained to him that she had been giving birth through all of this. He seemed surprised, and he poked his head in the laundry room to look at her. And then he wrapped things up, and we headed out to the front porch. He advised me to stay inside for the night and to call again if I had any more incidents, and he felt pretty sure that whoever it had been, they had moved on. He said he would file the appropriate reports, and I could get them from my homeowner's insurance if I would like in 48 hours. I did ask if there had been any more incidents recently in the area of any vandalism, and he simply said no. For what it's worth, this time I was the one certain that the other person wasn't telling the whole truth. As he turned and went down the steps, he stopped and looked back and told me that he would make sure this area was patrolled a little more frequently. And I was happy that he had already given me his card and told me again to use it if I should need anything. There were a few more screams throughout the night, but none so close as to make me worry. I went back and I sat near Mama on the laundry room floor, and, by the way, Mama delivered a total of 6 puppies that night. Unfortunately, the last one was stillborn. But as I sat there, I thought about all the years I had lived there and had never seen or heard a questionable thing. I wondered if Bigfoot and Sasquatch had territories, or if the recent run of home building in the next county had pushed them over this way. I sat there and my mind came up with 100 different scenarios as to what or how a Bigfoot ended up on my property that night. In the end, I didn't have any answers, and I still don't. In the next couple of days, I had the window replaced and I had the wooden porch railing repaired, part of it being replaced. Mama willingly stayed in the house except for her bathroom breaks, which we always took out front of the house. There were no more screams and no more damage. After a few weeks, I was comfortable enough to sit once again out on my back porch in the mornings with my cup of coffee. and I began to do so more often, enjoying the brilliant display of October colors of the trees. I did see them again early one morning, but I don't really think it was the same group as the ones that were here the night that Mama gave birth to her puppies. Their fur was lighter in color, almost a tan color. They were some distance back in the trees and were just walking along. They seemed peaceful, and I don't think they knew I was sitting there, so I just watched them until they moved out of sight. I last sighted them 6.5 years ago now, and I've heard and seen nothing since. In that time, I've had a fence put in for Mama, who no longer fears going out back, but she is still timid with sudden movements and noises in general, and I guess she always will be. As for those puppies, well, I found homes for 4 of them, with one of the homes being with the deputy who responded to my call that night. And by the way, he actually did stop by a few more times while he was out patrolling. He just wanted to check in. And between me and you, I believe he was actively looking for Bigfoot, but he couldn't say so. One of the times he was there, he happened to see the little fur balls of fur toddling around in the house, and he instantly took a liking to the one that I had been calling Brutus, as he tended to bulldoze his siblings, even though he was the smallest and was the last puppy born alive. Interestingly, the last time I saw that deputy, he was showing me pictures on his phone of his children and Brutus enjoying life and going on a lot of adventures together. As for the 5th puppy, well, she's still with me and Mama. I named her Flower, and like Mama, she has a sweet nature, and I just couldn't let her go. I am thankful that Mama came out of the woods and into my home that September day. She is my best friend, and along with Flower, we have had a lot of our own adventures and joy. And I'm real happy to say that not a single one of those adventures has ever included a Bigfoot. Okay, everyone, that was Judith's tale and how Bigfoot almost stole a pregnant dog. So tell me what you think about this. Do you think Bigfoot was after the dog to eat? Do you think it smelled it? What do you think? Let me know in comments below. And if you enjoyed Judith's story and would like to hear more, please hit that subscribe button and hit the like button. And I will definitely be uploading some new ones once I get back from Salt Fork State Park and the Ohio Bigfoot Convention. I'm also going to try to put a little compilation together about the convention, so stay tuned to that. And as always, thank you for listening. You guys, talk to you soon. Bye.